Yeah, I was in and out of pain and tried everything. Like I talked about with the chiros and the massage and the stretching and the make your core strong stuff that, you're talking about a minute ago. Like, you see your core strong. Like, well,
Yeah, she gets a strong core.
yeah, well, how come the strongest people in the world hurt their back?
Team, welcome back to another week of the Mops and Mo's podcast. Joining us this week, Alex. Thank you.
As always,
for stopping by. You guys will you will know that we typically have some banter before the episode, but in lieu of that, today I just kind of on a whim Googled fun facts. Did you know the Pope can't be an organ donor? I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I had planned on these being like, I was going to quiz you on some things, but then that popped up. I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. Which country has the most pyramids?
I'm guessing it's not Egypt.
You're correct.
Which country has the most pyramids? Is it like Central American?
No, that's a good guess though. Colder.
So not in the Americas.
Sorry, I meant colder like you're further away from where it actually is, not colder like temperature-wise.
Yeah. But the result is, regardless, it's not in the
Americas.
Americas. I don't know.
Sudan.
Really?
Yeah.
How big does a stack of rocks have to be before it's officially a pyramid?
That's a ChatGPT question. Hold on 1 second. How big does a stack of rocks have to be in order to be considered a pyramid? If there's an answer to this question, I will be amazed.
I'd be shocked.
It's typically defined as a monumental structure with a polygonal base and triangular sides. Okay, quiz question. I knew this. What is a pile of stones only a few feet high generally called?
A cairn?
Nice. A cairn. Correct. ChatGPT is danced around the...
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to find out is like, what's the threshold to go from cairn to pyramid?
Here was the question I was going to ask because that was interesting. Did you know bees can fly higher than Mount Everest?
Cool.
What business do bees have?
I got a fun fact for you.
Can you imagine getting stung by a bee on the top?
I live in Colorado. Killian Jornet is currently like running / biking his way through all the 14ers of Colorado. Like he's doing the 14ers and then biking between them. He's doing essentially like a Tour de France stage
with that shitty non-pose running form.
Yeah, it's crazy. But his foundation came out to our run club on Monday. So this is my Killian Jornet fun fact. Didn't actually learn it at Run Club. I've known it for a while. Killian Jornet functionally ran Everest, right? Like he summited Everest solo, unassisted, no comms, no fixed ropes, no oxygen, all that stuff. But he wasn't really proud of the time he got on his first attempt. So you know what he did?
Did it again?
He ran it a second time in the same week. Got a better time.
Speaking of running, this week's guest
does not do that.
Not a runner.
No.
Brian, if you do run, I apologize. I will get shit for this inevitably when we have him back on, but go ahead and tell us
listeners will notice
that we're talking to.
Listeners will notice that this week's guest is not afraid to say
You will
stuff.
very quickly notice that Brian does not give a shit and he rips into us so hard and it's beautiful.
It's fantastic. And he has earned that kind of status. So
yes.
Since entering his first powerlifting meet in 1999, Brian Carroll has risen to the absolute pinnacle of the sport. Brian totaled 2,730 at 275 pounds. He totaled 2,651 at 242 pounds. He has totaled more than 10 times his body weight in 3 different weight classes, 220, 242, and 275. He has both bench pressed and deadlifted over 800 pounds in 2 other weight classes. He's totaled 2,600 over 20 times in 2 different weight classes in his career. And he has squatted over 1,000 pounds more than 60 times, including being the first man to squat over 1,300 pounds.
Point of clarification. 60 times across the span of his career.
Correct.
He did not squat that for 60 reps.
No, not 60 reps.
He's not a body bearer.
After 10 years of high-level powerlifting competition and an all-time world record squat, as mentioned, In 2009, Brian was competing for a police academy scholarship. On a hot and humid July morning, Brian was hurdling over a barricade at a body weight of a lean, mean 275. He landed wrong, fell, and hurt his back. The resulting back pain has been a huge part of his professional journey, leading him to seek out none other than Stu McGill in 2013, who he later co-authored the book The Gift of Injury with in 2017. It's worth noting, I think, that the 1,306-pound squat came after all the back pain and the rehab stuff with Dr. McGill. Today, Brian owns his own coaching and consulting business in Florida, where he works with a wide range of athletes, including tactical professionals, and frequently delivers professional education for rehab professionals across the spectrum of rehab.
You'll notice a couple of things. Number one, you will hear 4 voices on this episode. So you have myself, Alex. You also have John, our physical therapist here at Mops and Mo's. We've had John on before as both a guest and a co-host.
Yep.
But we brought him back on for this episode because we felt that since we're discussing injury type stuff, it makes sense to have him here. You will also very quickly notice, as we mentioned, that Brian, I'm comfortable awarding him world champion shit talker accolades. He rips into us repeatedly and fluently, and it was well deserved. We had a blast with this one. We talk about it in the post episode conversation. We very quickly followed up this episode with some emails back and forth to bring him back on. So again, we mentioned this in the recording. We mentioned this after the recording. We'll mention this in the introduction. If any questions come out of this conversation, which they inevitably will, some of the things that he says are, I don't know, is controversial the right word? Some of the physical therapists might find some of the things that he says controversial. So if you do, you have questions for Brian, shoot them our way. Shoot them our way pretty quickly because we're going to have him on relatively soon here, and we will ask those to him.
Before we continue, as the guy who's going to receive your questions, since Drew doesn't manage any of the traffic that comes in from the audience.
Well, you could email Drew at mopsandmos.com.
You could. Please do, actually. That's the preferred method. I just want to briefly go over good ways to get in touch with us and then not as good ways to get in touch with us. Bluntly, the not so good way to get in touch with us is the DMs. I do look at them sometimes, but I no longer go through all of them like I used to. You'll notice if you message the page, you get an automatic reply pointing you towards the contact form on our website. That's one of many ways you can contact us is the contact us button on the website. Drew mentioned his email is drew@mopsandmos.com, mopsnmoes.com. Mine is alex@mopsandmos.com. You could also join the Discord. Great way to chat with both us and some podcast former guests and experts in the field. There's been some really cool dialogue on there lately, most recently around hybrid training strategy stuff, but we also saw a big thing about folks networking across the ROTC human performance space after that episode. A little bit of discussion of the whole SMART goal thing. Lots of good. If you want to do that episode follow-up type of discussion, joining the Discord is a great place to do that.
And conveniently, because we try to think that we're good at what we do, you can find all that information on our website.
Oh, yeah.
At www.mopsandmos.com.
And in the show notes.
Any last closing thoughts?
No, the audience should strap in for this one. It opened up borderline hostile. Pretty fun.
Well, I accused him of not having his lights turned on, and I set the tone, and you'll realize that very quickly in this episode that he unloaded, and I'm happy that he did. We walked away from this with a new friend, and that's always fun. So enjoy this one. You'd probably get tired of telling this story, but can you just, for folks that aren't familiar with the whole trajectory, walk us through? I mean, because I'm seeing over 1,000-pound back squat, which is fucking sick, but then also the back situation. Can you just walk through that whole story?
Man, you don't there's no foreplay.
No, we're right into it. I believe raw dog is the term. We're right into your whole life story in 3.5 minutes.
Yeah, but I don't know anything about you, Drew.
That's fair. I can
Drew,
tell you
what's
I
your
can
story?
squat about a fifth of what you lifted while still having a sore back from time to time.
Don't insult me with the 1,000-pound squat business.
Give me okay, actually, let me ask you this question because we were talking about this pre-recording and I'm curious. At what point does the 45-pound bar just feel like a PVC pipe?
We don't use those
Which ones, 45s or PVCs?
either.
Explain that.
We use a 65-pound squat bar.
So at what point does that just feel wicked light? Because I've always wondered, as you get stronger, obviously things feel lighter. I can't conceptualize being a world-class powerlifter.
At what point does the empty barbell feel light?
Yeah.
It's
Like
heavy for you?
I mean, as I've gotten older and my strength has regressed, yeah, it feels
Drew,
heavy.
we are 90 seconds into this podcast and you're getting your ass kicked.
No, listen, Brian and I are dancing right now.
We are, dude.
I love it.
I call it jazz whenever I have a client here and they want to know like everything we're going to do. And I'm like, that's why you're here. I don't know either, but we have time together and we can figure this out together depending on what you throw me as far as your injury mechanisms, your limitations, your goals. Then I see what I can do with that. And sometimes I can get someone feeling significantly better that session. Maybe I can get the pain out of their leg they've had for 2 years. It doesn't mean they're fixed, but I've been able to change the position of the disc where it's not encroaching that root anymore, that thecal sac. And sometimes I can get lucky. Other times we just kind of figure out ways to make someone just kind of stabilized and kind of take down their pain a little bit. Yeah, that's called jazz. So we don't always know the next thing. Depending on what you throw at me, I'll throw you something back. Depending on the stimuli I give you, the response, and then we kind of, sometimes it becomes a pretty cool little rabbit trail that we find out a lot about a client. They might be a lot more robust and just the most simple thing that has went over their head. They're intelligent. A lot of people that are real smart and thorough will miss the most obvious things right in front of them because they hyper focus on everything, and then they simply just don't understand how to stiffen their core. And so that light bulb goes off, and that changes everything for the rest of the assessment because they have an unstable spine. They never understood how to stiffen their core. They have zero pain from like that point on. But anyway, that's called Stu and I call that jazz. Dr. McGill and I. But my name's Brian Carroll, and I started powerlifting in 1999 when I graduated high school. I played baseball up until that point. And I was kind of a little bit bitter after I graduated because I was a good athlete. I never really dedicated myself truly to baseball like I could have. I started lifting in like 9th grade and got strong. And, I was kind of mad that I didn't apply myself by playing multiple sports. And so I did my first bench press competition in 99. And at that point, I just put my head down for 21 years after, I started in June of 99. My last competition was October of 2020. And that's all I focused on. It's all I did for 21 years straight. And finished with the biggest squat of all time, 1306, done October 3rd of 2020. And the same things that I used to rebuild my back in 2013 that I learned and co-labored with Dr. McGill on were the same types of stimuli that I used to build a core of iron that could support, first person to squat 1,300 pounds. And I weighed, the guy that had the squat record before me was 500 pounds. So I did it at, 300 pounds, which is under the 308 limit. And then there's a super heavyweight after that. I finished with that squat, pain and symptom free. And it was an interesting journey. In 2013, I was pretty much done with powerlifting after having all-time world records in multiple weight classes and winning multiple world titles, 220, 242, 275. I found myself pretty much done because my back was smoked. I'd gotten a runaround from the doctors and the physical therapist. They wanted to do a fusion on me, or they told me I was done. There was no assessment. And I found Dr. McGill and went to see him. And he told me right away, I'm done. He said, I can probably, and this is what we do as clinicians, and specifically our focus on the thoracic spine, the lumbar spine, and then, the hips, because you have to coordinate the hips with the spine. But we never make promises to people because you can't. There's no slam dunk guarantee. Why? Well, among many other reasons, you can't do the work for them. Some people just won't commit to backing off lifting, or they won't commit to doing the things that you have them do and avoiding the things that you tell them to avoid. So, as we always tell people, we can't make any promises. He said, I can't make any promises, but your sacrum split, your discs are smashed up. You don't have any discs at 5S1 and L4, L5, and you've got so much compression intolerance that you can't even sit in a chair or stand up without pain. If you're my son, I'd urge you to retire, just because of our assessment, our time together, what I know about the type of vertebral body fractures that you have, and further loading these fractures could result in permanent disability or worse, and it wouldn't be wise. So I pushed back and said, well, I want to get my squat record back. And you said you can get me pain-free. If you get me pain-free, I'm going to come back and I'm going to compete again. I'm going to push forward and I'm going to compete again. And we volleyed back and forth a bit, played a little jazz. And then he saw that I was serious. And he says, okay, fine, get pain-free. Give it some time. You get pain-free. And then who knows, maybe you're right. Maybe we end up writing a book about it. And so within 18 months, I failed trying to come back too quick. And that's something we're going to talk about today, is the process that you need to rebuild proper tissue tolerance. And example, compression for me, and extension and shear and flexion, loads of compression, obviously. But yeah, we rebuilt, and I became a practitioner shortly thereafter. And I competed for another 7.5 years after meeting McGill when he said I was done. And yeah, so I've been a clinician. I became a massage therapist in the early 2000s, and I actually worked full time about 10 years as a massage therapist. And on the side, I'd personal train. I might, sell some drugs here or there.
As you do.
We'll talk about that too.
Yeah, like maybe a bottle of testosterone. No, I'm just kidding. I would never do that. But definitely didn't do that. But I did do, no illegal practices with massage therapy. But did that for a bit, and then it just came looking for me. I never set out, even after I'd rebuilt myself with McGill's help and got back and hit all better numbers in powerlifting. I was never like, dude, I want to be like a back guy. I want to do that. Never. I wasn't even really interested in it, to be honest with you, but it just came looking for me. It's the weirdest thing. Like, people asked me about my story, and then we wrote Gift of Injury in 2017. It was released, and just it's just like people kept asking me about my back, what I did. I'm not a clinician, I'd say, I don't want to help, here's what I did. And then eventually I got so many requests that it just overwhelmed me. And then I started backing off of my consulting and my powerlifting, barbell training centric focus, and then started pivoting to half and half with the spine. And then now I just kind of turned down all the powerlifting stuff, to be honest with you. That's a whole thing we can talk about, but I enjoy learning from McGill. I'm a McGill certified practitioner, and it's been about 7 years since I've been actually certified, and I work with all populations now. And my pretty much my probably most consistent type client is like a mid 30 to 55-year-old male that doesn't really know good form, and they blow themselves apart, and they keep re-injuring themselves. They may have had a surgery or two, and they've been in pain for 5 to 15 years. And that's my typical client. No one calls me, Tuesday after tweaking their back on Monday night deadlifting. They find me, and that's what I was kind of getting at. Like, these people came running for me and looking for me through the story, because the people that fail through the system, they have tried the chiropractic, they've tried the physical therapy, the cookie cutters, they've tried the stretching and the generic shit on YouTube, and they've gotten worse. And doctors have, spend 15 minutes with them and say, you're screwed or you're fine, lift lighter, whatever that means, lift lighter, do Pilates, do yoga. And so people come and find me, and that's what I do. I help people from average Joes that just want to be able to pick up their kid pain free, to strongman athletes, to berets, to SEALs, to Air Force Special Force dive team, and then just regular people that are trying to stay in the military or a ranger. And then lots of average Joes that just don't understand how to train without tweaking their back. And that's what I do now, man. So that's kind of, that was kind of a broad question, but kind of passed over 21 years. It's been a lot of learning through experience, a lot of anecdotal evidence, but then pairing myself with McGill with the 250 plus research papers and his time with working with all types of athletes. If you've seen them on the cover of Sports Illustrated, he's worked with them for their back and rebuilt them and got them back to win this thing or get another 10 years in the league or go and see, the three-peat champions of this. He just doesn't advertise it. And honestly, a lot of people make us sign NDAs too. So we can't go around on YouTube and just brag about the people that we work with. But former power lifter, massage therapist, and now I have a practice in Jacksonville, Florida, where I do consulting for people that just want to build injury resilience. And then I do virtual, and then I help people here in person in the clinic with injury resilience and back pain assessment. And what I specialize in is the rebuild phase, the bridge between starting to become pain-free or even trying to get pain-free. And then what do you do when the pain starts to get settled to maintain that momentum? And how do you fill that gap between, baby giraffe legs here, barely pain-free, to being a super soldier again, or being a super soldier for the first time, and the demands that are going to be required going, you're banged up from selection, and then you got the Q course around the corner, and you know what those demands are going to be. So how are you going to get from barely being able to walk to being able to complete the course? So that's what I specialize in, not just with the berets, but just in general, problem solving, getting from pain-free or getting pain-free to restoring athleticism for the layperson or for the super soldier, for the world champion powerlifter or strongman, or your favorite man crush on TV.
Brian, I got a follow up for you. You didn't really go into it, and it's just okay if you don't. With the 18 months that you had for rehab, obviously that's, with the vertebral end plate fracture, that's kind of the timeline it takes. But can you give us a little bit what goes on behind the curtains for that rebuild phase when you're training guys to not only be pain free, but also to perform?
Yeah, so it was 18 months, and it was a lot of patience. And so what I did during that time, I can just take you through it, give you kind of the cliff notes. So my pain triggers were basically just everything. I had no pain-free capacity to sit, stand, walk, crawl, and then obviously lift. Any lifting just made me worse for the most part. So I went into a desensitization phase where I just walked and I learned to move well, not provoke my pain. I got in a little bit better shape, started walking a lot, and then doing specific core exercises, not just the McGill Big Three, which everyone builds a straw man out of McGill's work. Not that he's worked with, again, every, from average layperson to world champion and everything. It's a lot more than just three stupid exercises, he would say. And started off with planks and variations of the Big Three, and then progressed out to carries as my pain wound down, and some sheer, like variations of plank on a liable surface, a stir the pot, then some goblet squats. And that lasted for a few months as the pain was settling down, and I felt a little bit of still feel a little bit of sensitization into the sacrum there because of the deep ache, but it would be provoked a bit and then it would wind back down. And that's where the magic is towing the line of stimuli and micro trauma. And that's what nobody knows how to do. I mean, I'm just being real with you. Nobody knows how to do that. And it it takes patience because your body will lie to you. You know, bones are not muscles. Some people, if you're on sauce and you're in, you know, you just have hyper recovery, some people can train every day, the same body part within reason. The muscular aspect, not the tendons, not the ligaments, not the bones, but the muscles can recover from that and is fewer than 24 hours. But bone takes about 5 days to fully scaffold over and heal. So I'd give it a week just to be safe. And I loaded in a very simple progressive overload with deloads every 3 to 4 weeks, where I didn't really load it on, kept building my core capacity, because one of the biggest misunderstandings about resilience, let's say the spine resilience, is it has nothing to do with strength. It has everything to do with strength endurance of the muscles of the trunk. And when we talk about muscles of the trunk, I'm talking about everything from your testicles to your ears, everything here, including your glutes, your lats, your pecs, not just your rectus, but your internal, external, and TVA, and then the hoops that wrap around, and your spinal extensor muscles, the spinalis, iliocostalis, longissimus. And so I was training the core to build endurable tension underloaded, endurable stiffness. And after the pain settled more and more, I knew I wasn't fixed. But then from goblet squats and carries and such, I progressed into light loading with just the barbell and like a quarter on there, and then slowly built up over months with staggered loading, volume, intensity, frequency staggered, drop the reps down as the weight goes up, less volume, just, you know, standard principles for overload, and just followed the principles of the science of the week in between lifts. It wasn't perfectly linear, but it went pretty well, with one kind of failure at the 2014 Arnold, where I'd built back the barbell lifts, over 1,000 on the squat, you know, over 8 on the deadlift again. But at the meet, even though I was winning, and we talk about this in our book, Gift of Injury, that documents the process of rebuilding and then, you know, setting the biggest squat of all time. But I didn't have enough capacity to make it through a meet. So you got to squat a bunch of squats, you know, and so squatted 1,100 and then benched, you know, whatever. And then deadlifting, my back was locked up and it wasn't a good feeling. I didn't have any radiating pain, but my back was so stiff from the compression and shear from the squat and the extension and compression from the bench. And then deadlifting, I had to bow out, even though it was a sub, you know, warm up lift to win the meet. I just shut it down at 225 and pulled a token. And then I had to restructure, and I realized I needed more compression tolerance because the bones still needed more to heal. So I shaved off about 10% body weight, you know, because walking is 2.5 times body weight compression. So if I'm carrying around 290 pounds unnecessarily, you shave 10% off of that. I was able to more than double that in training capacity. But it took 6 months to flesh that out, drop the 25-ish pounds. And then I started mimicking the demands of the meet, being a variation of the squat, bench, and deadlift on the same day, having a full week to recover and just supplemental stuff during the week. So I learned a lot during that process, but it was progressive overload. And it's not just about intuition, but it's also following the science, because we're not talking about, you know, rebuilding progressive overload with the bicep. We're talking about bone that it takes a long time for it to fully mend, not just you know, a partial, or the pain's gone or mostly gone, but that was what the process looked like. And it wasn't anything that I found as far as like experimental supplementation or like extra calcium or magnesium or anything like that. Nothing sexy. I wasn't even taking BPC 157 or TB 500, even though I knew about the stuff at the time. I didn't take anything like that. I didn't take any growth hormone. I just
What
good
about
old
collagen?
fashioned, yeah, good old fashioned progressive overload, eating enough food and plenty of recovery and not crossing that tipping point. I know that's a big question, so I hope I didn't like give you a little bit too much there and lose you.
No, I
Well,
think that was
the
great.
piece I want to dive into a little bit is the whole, like, a lot of people get told when they have back pain that, like, well, you just need to be stronger. Like, if you like strengthen this up, you'll get past it. You carry on, and you addressed that it's different components of that, and it's a different approach to core training and things like that. I'm curious, for a guy who was already squatting 4-digit numbers, how do you assess for and find where the limiters are that you need to get stronger at or get more strength endurance on to start dealing with it? Like, you had to be pretty freaking strong if you were hitting those numbers. How did you find the weaknesses at that point that you started to work on as you started the rebuild phase?
Well, when you get a back injury, you lose a lot of your stability, not necessarily spinal stability, but potentially, but my full body stability was going because my body was trying to save myself from catastrophic injury, right? So I'd get the shakes real bad. I had no, so I needed a lot of work. And so starting over, I built everything from the ground up. And I never trained for strength endurance. I didn't plank very much. I didn't do a bunch of carries. I did your traditional leg raises and weighted sit-ups and, rounded back good mornings, just to train the posterior. And so I completely started over as a beginner and learned from McGill about building the strength endurance. And believe it or not, I see some people that will come here to the clinic and they might be, they could be a Green Beret that they're still strong. They can squat 400 pounds. They can trap bar 400 pounds. They can run, whatever, the 1.5 or 2 miles and, a really impressive time for a bigger guy. But they can't even do a side plank for 10 seconds without shaking like a paint mixer. So being strong on a barbell doesn't necessarily mean that someone's core is up for the task of staying locked in. I'm sure you've both seen guys that have a lot of spine motion in their back that are successful lifters. In particular, the Ripito style squat is like a slinky coming up. They lift the hips first and then the back slinkies for a lot of those guys. And they lift big weight. Same thing happens for the deadlift. So it catches up to people over time because that back is not protected and locked in. It's kind of all over the place. So I was one of those guys that would muscle through lifts. So let me give you an example. So what we teach people now is you keep the core locked in on a squat, right? So if you start to get forward with it, what you want to do is correct through your ankles, not by getting rounded over and trying to muscle fuck the weight up through extension. That's a good way to annihilate your spine. But we teach you start to get a little bit forward. You let yourself lean back further on your heels and steer that load versus trying to segment it out with just your thoracic spine. So we teach people how to keep their core locked in and certain athletic drills that we use with people to get people to correct that. And if you have a strong core, a core of iron, as I've kind of coined it, then you can do those type of things and stay resilient and correct the lift instead of the form falling apart. And yeah, you deadlifted, but you had 3 hinges, one at your cervical and thoracic, one at your thoracic and lumbar, and one at your freaking lumbosacral, and no wonder your back kills you from your ears to your ass because you're bending it and flexing it all over the place over and over with substantial load. I mean, that's why you're here to see me, I guess, but I have a feeling I know what's wrong with you.
Can you, I mean, you've mentioned core training now, and I mean, you obviously strike me as somebody who legitimately knows what that means versus social media world where core training is just like the latest buzzword. What is core
Hollywood,
training?
like Hollywood, goofballs that have
Yeah,
the newest actor doing some kind of stupid hanging
like
twist with a kettlebell wrapped around their ankle or something retarded, like it makes a mockery of what we do actually, and the question, how'd you phrase the question?
like what
How
is
do I
core?
look at how
What is
do I
core
define
training?
core training?
Yeah, what is core training?
What is core training? Well, core training, I guess we'd have to, well, be training them. This is big. It's
Yeah,
training the muscles of the core to work in harmony and allow the athleticism and help you to achieve the goals that you're trying to do. So if you're a power lifter, you need a rigid core, and you're going to train the core in certain ways that keep you locked in and rigid. So core training, I would define as anything that true core training does not isolate just the different parts of the we're going to isolate the lower abs or whatever that means with the hip flexors, or we're just going to work on our six pack and do some twists. The way I define core training is training every plane of the cores of the muscles of the trunk to build endurance over time. So we work the anterior, the lateral, and the posterior aspects of the trunk. So that's what I look at, is training the musculature of the trunk and building up the different compartments. And it's pretty easy to figure out if someone has deficits, put them, for training the core. We're going to attack the core. So what are the demands of the sport or the task or whatever it is of the back injured person or the not back injured person? And then if they're pain free, I'll have them do a reverse plank on the back extension machine back there. And if they can't hold it for 15 seconds, they've got no extensor endurance. It's terrible in hip flexor and glute and hamstring endurance. If they can't do a side plank for 10 seconds, and they're trying to be a world-class power lifter, man, that's bad. And if they can't do a front plank, or they can't do any stir the pot, or like hold, V-sit or whatever it may be. So, yeah, that's kind of an interesting question. Like, what do I see core training as? It's training the muscles of the trunk to meet the demands and or deficits of the athlete for the demands of the sport.
Do you see, or I guess over the years, did you see a lot of your fellow powerlifters who are inarguably very strong people lacking that kind of core endurance that you talk about now? And has that kind of transition? Because I'm just thinking off the top of my head, I've seen a lot of strong dudes who would make the case that like, oh, just because I'm strong, I have a strong core. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to lift the thing. Have you seen a transition in kind of the powerlifting space to accommodate more of this type of stuff? Or are guys still just getting away with muscle fucking big weights?
Well, I don't speak caveman, so that guy that say I be strong in my work or whatever. I don't speak that kind of language, so I'd probably have to get someone to translate it. But what was the question again? I'm sorry.
Like, do you see, I guess the way I would phrase this is like, do you see an acceptance of more of this core training now in powerlifting, whereas before it might have just been, I can lift the weight, therefore I'm good to go?
Yeah. And I used to be that way too. Before I had to change my thinking and get humbled.
Team, this episode of Mops and Mo's is brought to you by Train Heroic. Train Heroic is a reliable, well-designed platform for programming, tracking, and communicating with athletes. If you've been with us for any length of time, you will know that Train Heroic is the platform that we use to power our own training, long and strong, which you can find at our website, mopsandmos.com. If you're looking for a solid platform to support your own coaching, whether it's your full-time role or a side hustle, Train Heroic is definitely worth checking out. You can use the link in any of our show notes, you can find it in our newsletter, or you can head to our website, mopsandmos.com/training to get your first week for free.
Yeah, I was one of the first people to really put it out there, man. There wasn't any known powerlifters that were promoting the McGill method or building the core in the ways that we were doing. Not that there wasn't anyone doing it. There wasn't anyone that was a top powerlifter that was vocal about it. They may have done aspects of the McGill method, but no one had come out and had rebuilt themselves with the McGill method, posted on Elite FTS and, writing books about it. And yeah, there's been a ton. I mean, it's just, it went from nobody respecting the, how to build the core for a power lifter, doing the traditional reverse hypers and weighted sit-ups and leg raises and cable crunches when you do none of those motions in powerlifting. And so you can make the argument that, yeah, having doing some twists and building your obliques up with a slosh pipe and doing weighted abs and such can make your rectus strong, but do an EMG test and see what's working harder. Is it your rectus, or is it your hip flexors, or is it the discs of your spine? But since you stay locked in particular on the squat and the deadlift, for anyone with a brain, it makes sense that, hey, I need to stay in this position locked in to be the most successful. Any movement is not good. Would we agree? Any movement, excess movement, like a slinky, the spine moving like this on a deadlift or a squat is probably not efficient. We can have a debate about whether it's dangerous, but that is never going to be efficient, whether it's a drag car or a deadlift. Right?
So I think there's a
Perfect,
few
yeah.
rabbit holes we want to go down. I know like Drew's curious about some of the psychology of all this. We'll chase those, but I do want to check one thing first, because I know as we were learning about who you were before we had you on, I was a little bit surprised by this. I had assumed your injury came from powerlifting,
No.
but that is not the case. Can you tell us about how you got hurt?
Yeah, so it was cumulative. So yeah, powerlifting definitely contributed to it because of the way I trained my core, the way I treated my body. And then I actually had back pain for the first time that was pretty bad in 10th grade, and then another time when I was in my early 20s, and then I fell actually on an obstacle course. But I had tweaked myself deadlifting and everything else. But that when I fractured my sacrum, that was from a fall where I landed on my back, trying to or I was hurtling over a barricade, and it was soaked with morning dew here in Florida in July. And so there was the first person on the course that day was me, and nobody would, if they were going hard, would have landed on their feet because it was so wet, and no one knew that. So landed on my back, and it hurt pretty good. But yeah, it just kind of cascaded from there, starting in it was 97 and then 03, and then really significantly in 09 where I fell. And then over the next couple of years until 13, yeah, I was in and out of pain and tried everything, like I talked about with the chiros and the massage and the stretching and the make your core strong stuff that, you were talking about a minute ago. Like, you just need your core strong. Like, well,
Yeah, she gets a strong core.
yeah, well, how come the strongest people in the world hurt their back?
Mm-hmm. It's like perfect running form. And then you see some world-class runners. It's like, well, it's all relative.
So this brings us to like kind of a topic. I haven't found stuff really written by you necessarily, and I'm curious about your opinion, but we primarily work with and talk to military folks. We talk to providers in military settings, and the military is super hooked on the concept of injury prevention. What do we do that prevents the injury from happening? I'm curious, maybe it's in like how you would have done your journey differently if you'd known what you know now, but maybe injury prevention in general. Where do you see tactics from what you've learned that apply to helping people prevent injuries, or is it a little more complicated than people sometimes make it out to be?
I mean, yeah, that's what I do. So the way people train, I'll look at their program or the volume, the intensity, the frequency, the exercises they do or that they don't do. There's all kinds of ways to approach building resilience and building minimal standards before someone is lifting with a barbell. And yeah, so specifically, the same things that build resilience will make you the best at what you do. It'll just be in different doses and phases and stages. So, like I was saying about my squat, pretty much the same thing that I did to get myself out of pain were the same principles that I used to build the biggest squat ever done. And it was just more the same: proximal stiffness, distal athleticism. And that's what the name of the game of powerlifting about is: compression tolerance. How much can you keep your spine and crush yourself with and come back up? How much can you pull yourself apart with the deadlift off the floor and pick it up without pulling apart? It's about compression and shear and how much can you tolerate. And there's no better way to do that than building proximal stiffness and unleashing distal athleticism through the ball and socket joints. But avoiding certain exercises that I see like the cadre and such do in some of these courses it's just crazy. And some of these people, let's just say, I'm not going to name the selection in particular, but let's say there's a selection over in the west, towards the west, but not San Diego. They depending on who the strength coach is or the cadre that's over that, they will squat them 3 times a week while they're still running all the miles and doing all the diving and all this stuff. They've already eliminated all the people that they didn't want there. So these people are people they've already invested in. And, these guys are halfway through and they're just destroying their spines with deadlifting from the floor after running, and rucking 10 miles with 100 pounds on their back, and, supersetting burpees and like maxing deadlifting from the floor. Like, what the hell is going on? So basic programming principles and avoiding certain exercises, and having specific exercises and setups that are more resilient and going to be better for the athlete. And it's hard to do in group training, but you shouldn't be having your guys doing a bunch of sit-ups. I mean, it's just you need to get good at the sit-up to pass the PT test, but you don't get good at sit-ups by doing a bunch of sit-ups. It doesn't work that way. I wish it did, but especially the back injured person, I don't have them do hardly any sit-ups. We build anti-flexion, anti-rotation. We build core endurance. We'll do stir the pot for 5 minutes at a time. There's not a person in the world that can do stir the pot, planking on a liable Swiss ball, tiny circles, north, south, east, west, circles for 5 minutes that can't smash 70 sit-ups in 60 seconds. You don't have to train a sit-up to be really good at it. You train the muscles, and then you might need to do a couple bursts at like 50% just to make sure the psoas is ready, right? But these people that train, whether it be people that bring in the consult or the people they get on their own, they hire on the side, they train the course. That's the worst thing you could do. They train for max pull-ups. So we're going to do max pull-ups all the time. Max push-ups. Okay, we're going to max push-up. It's just really archaic the way they approach that. So basically avoiding just low-hanging fruit exercises that just aren't worth the squeeze, and picking good exercises for the tasks and the demands of the person is a good way to build a resilient person or soldier. And just having stages of their training. And I know they have to be mentally tough and you have to push them in different parts, but the weight room is not the same as being in Robin Sage. The weight room is controlled. All variables are controlled. Do not destroy your people in the weight room. This applies to baseball, to football, to soldiers, to even powerlifters. Availability supersedes ability. So if you have all of your money invested in these gadgets and gizmos at these different training centers, but you got shit people there that are just, well, great, you're a physical therapist. Now tell me what you're going to do about making this athlete get out of back pain. Well, you don't know how to do an assessment in PT school. You don't know how to do a true back assessment in PT school. Your width of knowledge has to be this big, but it's this deep. There's not enough time for you to know the lumbar spine and how to do a true assessment, because you need 4 hours and you don't have enough time to learn that in physical therapy school. So I'm not saying there's no physical therapists that know how to do a back assessment. That's not what I said. You don't learn enough in physical therapy school to give a proper back assessment.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. But I have a follow-up question to that. When you're talking this 4-hour assessment, one, what goes into it? What are the secrets behind this that we're not getting in school? And then two, what is valid and reliable in that assessment that you're using that other people could use? Because I want to know.
I sense a little sassiness over there, bud. You okay?
There's a little bit. There's a little bit.
John's the most sassy. That's why we brought him in here.
Okay. That's cute for a
Hey,
little
I'll
guy.
give you some background. I read Gift of Injury like right as I graduated. I loved it. I loved the book. It was super good for me to learn that as like a young clinician. And then as I've learned more patterns and more assessments, I've kind of diverged into different assessment techniques, which still lead to success. So I'm just curious, what goes into this 4-hour assessment?
Is your butt hurting?
Yeah.
I can tell, little guy. You okay, little guy?
Yeah, man.
You sure?
Oh, yeah.
Seems like you want to put your hands on me. They get broken off.
No, this is all professional. I just want to hear what goes into it.
Yeah. Well, I can read tone and I can read body language too, man. You're tight.
Yeah.
4-hour assessment. So we interview. You don't have time in traditional physical therapy to do a full interview. Sometimes this will last an hour and a half. We go through the psychology. We go through their injury history, what they've tried. Remember, we don't see the people that you do. We see the people that you guys fail with. If you get the easy cases and you get them, great. We see the people that have been in pain for 15 years. Insurance doesn't cover us. They find us. So we have to be different. So how are we different, you ask? We start with an interview, and we find out who they are, where they've been, where they're going, who they are as a person. What are their goals? What are the demands of their job? What is their family life like? So there's your hour and a half or so right there. Then we go through a mechanical assessment. We go through various compression tests. We go through various, we test for flexion intolerance, flexion generated pain, extension, rotation, torsion, posterior, anterior shear. We test the femoral nerve roots, the sciatic nerve roots. And then after we get an understanding of what provokes the pain mechanically, what the pattern is, what dermatomes are affected, then we start to form a little bit of a hypothesis. Then another thing you don't learn in PT school is I pop their MRI in and I read and interpret their MRI without the radiology report, because most of those are useless, because you got a radiologist that sits in a room all day looking at screens and never talks to one patient. So they are looking and use words like minimal and insignificant and unremarkable. What is that? Unremarkable to you? Or you think it's unremarkable because it's not a big bulge, it's, minimal bulging. Well, most disc bulges are actually dynamic in nature and change with load. So words like minimal are really unprofessional to use. And they miss so many different things. So we don't pay attention to the radiology report most of the time. I'll read it after I look at the MR. And I usually have a pretty good, 80% shooting rate of what I'm going to find on the MR from the assessment. And I'll find it on the MR. I look for 1-to-1 ratios of pain generators versus what I see on the MR and from the assessment. Is it a ligamentum flavum thickened? And a facet joint that's hypertrophic and arthritic, along with a bit of bulging that the radiologist didn't consider significant, but they get encroached from the posterior element of the thecal sac. And so then I go and I look for certain things, and I have a good understanding of what to look for in pattern recognition. And then I bring the client in, I show them, unlike the doctors and the physical therapists, I show them their MRI. I spent 30 minutes going through all the different, the axial, the sagittal, the coronal, take them through and show them whether they have, their disc bulge. And I teach them why this happens and why they have fasciculations in their calf just randomly. And their doctor's been telling them they're crazy. Their PT's been having them massage their calf and stretch their calf when they've been getting, L5 or S1 dermatome pain from their annular tear that doesn't really show up on an MR, but we can provoke it and take it away over and over. I knew what to look for on the MRI. So after we go over the MRI, answer their questions. So there's your 3 hours. Then we go out there and work on reprieve, and I build them a resilience plan. Sometimes that goes into 5 hours. And then if they're an athlete, I need a second day with them. Day 2, we review. They always have more questions because no one's ever spent this much time with them. We follow up, we review, and then we go out and we start workshopping and playing jazz. And we work on the stage 2 progressions that they'll need to do when they get out of pain. And that'll be according to the demands of their job. First and foremost, most of these people need to get back to work. And so that's number one. So if they're a welder, it's going to be a little different than a desk worker. And so we have to go through the positions that they do and try to teach them ways to mitigate the stress on their spine. And it's going to depend on so many different things, whether they have to quit their job or not. If someone has an unstable spondy and they're going to need to get a fusion, then they're not going to be able to go back to the welding job in the next year or so, most likely. It's just how it works. But But if they have a disc bulge that's dynamic and we can get it settled down a bit, I might be able to give them a better prognosis. They might not necessarily healed, but they'll be significantly better the next couple of months because of what we've found, and we're able to stiffen and get the disc to centralize a little bit. But day 2 of the athlete will be, like I said, playing jazz and getting them ready to get them back to their job, of course, get them back involved with their family, having sex with their wife, and living life. Then we work on all the things that they're not going to go into doing, the different types of carries and the shear, whether it be a variation of a pallet press or a back extension hold, and then I'll show them what I can and whatever they can do pain free. And they have a full report that I write in that takes about 2 hours, the MRI findings, the assessment findings, suggestions, training plan, prognosis, and then any other training and movement tips. And sometimes it's a suggestion to, look for a microdiscectomy surgery or laminectomy or laminotomy if it doesn't resolve. And that's typically for people with unrelenting pain down the leg, never any back pain. If they have back pain, they're typically not going to do well with a microdiscectomy. Fusion might be a different story. Or maybe a disc seal because they have a tough annular tear, which is a tear in the outer ring of the annulus, where it causes a lot of inflammation and a biochemical response as well as a mechanical response. And so, yeah, we that's what we do in 4 hours.
So not a question
think?
here, but a shout out. I will say, if you want to dive into that process a little bit, before we had Brian on, I spent a little bit of time watching their assessment of Lane Norton from years back. One, it's fun to see a young Lane Norton, just like who he was as a person. It's a little different than he is today. But it's a really cool insight into the process they go through from initial assessment through prescription, interviewing the person, talking about it, coaching. It's with both Brian and Dr. McGill working on Lane.
Yeah. So I've done hundreds of these assessments, and no one can shoot 100%. It just it doesn't happen. Well, number one, because I see the people that go to the chiropractor, the PT, that's great. If they go to the doctor and they get some goofy prescription for 800 milligram ibuprofen and Pilates and it works for them, I don't see those people. I see the people that have had back pain for 35 years and multiple failed fusions that just didn't take. Multiple microdiscectomies that they're just trying to get a little bit of pain-free capacity. I see the worst of the worst cases. And that's why you need more time, because they're complex cases with sometimes you have disc pain, facet pain, ligament pain, instability from ligaments and from softened collagen. You got a couple smashed up vertebral bodies, and surgery isn't going to be a fix for them because they have so many different pain generators all throughout their lumbar and thoracic spine. And you got to figure out ways to stabilize it, reduce the pain, and try to get them back to some semblance of a normal life. And so those are tough cases. So I see some that people have missed that I can't believe people have missed because it's been so obvious. I wonder how they've stayed in pain for 10 years and seen dozens of physical therapists when it was clear as day. I had a client here the other day that brought in his MR, and he was a pro BMXer for 18 years, and he retired, started doing marathons, and his back just went out on one day after some deadlifts. And the next day he went to pick up a gum wrapper out of his parking lot, and his back, he blew a disc and an end plate or whatever. And so he got his MRI, and the radiologist, this guy had his whole L5 vertebra was bright white, like one of these lights behind me. And they didn't even mention any modic changes or end plate damage to the fucking L5. And the S1 was the same way. How okay, if he's a power lifter, okay, this makes sense. But if it's a 60-year-old sedentary person, which you don't know anything about this person other than maybe their age, if you even pay attention to that. And the fact they don't mention this guy has some severe compression damage, it's bizarre to me. They miss these things, and they'll say no significant disc bulging, and they'll have flattened discs all the way up and down their spine. I'm just like, holy crap, what do these guys do? And it's not one time, it's every fucking week. Every week it's the same old stuff. So I don't have a lot of faith in the system because of no one communicates with each other. That's why we need 4 hours. I'm the specialist, I'm the radiologist, I'm the everything. If everyone communicated with each other, the PT, the GP, the surgeon, the pain management doctor, the chiropractor, if they all communicated and worked together, I wouldn't need to do a 4-hour assessment.
Yeah, I mean, I got it. Time is money. It's great. I think for some of those more difficult patients, specifically military treatment styles, in some units will afford them 4, 12, whole bunch of time, sometimes weeks at a time of dedicated care to work with subject matter experts in different fields, to get imaging, to be able to work with your general practitioners as well as your rehab providers. And oftentimes just time away from the unit does more help than anything else, as well as just being heard with all that time. So you're right. I definitely think that most systems in place for physical therapy are not ideal for what patients need. Patients love being heard. And 30 minutes of time with your physical therapist and maybe 30 minutes with an aide afterward is not enough if you're doing that twice a week, especially because you're not really getting the one-on-one care that you need. So I agree with all that. But my question is, because, you did call me sassy, so I'm going to play devil's advocate for you. How do you explain like the 50% of MRIs that show something wrong, but patients are asymptomatic? Like what does that play a role in when you're reading these MRIs and that it might be a false positive?
Oh man, you got me, dude. Shit. I never heard of that study.
It's multiple studies.
Right, exactly. So we don't care about the people that are asymptomatic. We don't care about that. That's why we have an assessment that lasts 4 hours. It's beyond your capability to go to the specific segment to look for and generate the pain, whether it be right on the spinous process, pulling on the nerve roots, different positions. And so we don't care. There's many people, I see some people with the complete lumbar spines destroyed. They have pain from one dermatome. So yeah, but here's the thing. So devil's advocate, back to you, honey. What about the 50% of the people that are symptomatic? You don't just take half of a study and throw the other half out. Science isn't just picking and choosing what you want. Let's talk about the other part of the study. The other 50% did have symptoms and did have disc hernias of various kinds. So you can't have it both ways.
Well, no, the study was all asymptomatic individuals. But I agree with you in that
50% means the other 50% that had disc bulges had pain.
No. The study was all asymptomatic individuals. 50% of the asymptomatic individuals had changes on MRI, indicating false positives. But I get what you're saying.
You're not understanding what that means. That's the problem.
The whole population was
50%
asymptomatic.
of people,
No
like
low
you
back
said,
pain. Yeah.
50% of the people were asymptomatic with disc bulges on the MRI. The other 50% had pain.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
What happened to the other 50%?
I'll go ahead and link the study in the show.
I was going to ask,
notes.
what's the study?
But you know what? There is evidence to suggest that people with MRI changes, like if it shows something, they are double the likelihood to show pain. That's a separate study. So I get where that's coming from. My question to you though was specific: is how do you address those false positives? I just want to get a better understanding of what goes into that assessment.
Listen. You're not understanding. You're not getting it.
I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying.
No,
I don't think we're understanding each other.
I think there's just a disconnect with you being indoctrinated as a physical therapist.
Sure, maybe.
And though you have a bias. I have a bias because I came from a powerlifting background. You have a bias because you have a PhD, and Your breath is
Definitely not
this
that.
wide, but it's this deep and everything. And you have to learn through continuing education and such, like podcasts like this, to understand people that only do backs or people that only do shoulders. You're not going to get all of that in school. And I said that earlier and it ruffled your feathers, but it's true. It's not like I don't know what physical therapy school is or I don't work with physical
Well,
therapists.
I'm not disagreeing with you in any of that.
But you did. You did.
No, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just trying to understand the false positives. That's all I want to know.
You're not, I'm not trying to be rude to you, but our assessment provokes pain on levels
Okay.
that have, yes. So how is that a false positive when we provoke the pain, take it away, and it has a disc herniation at that level when I tension their sciatic nerve, provoke that dermatome of pain.
Mm-hmm.
We see the disc bulge on that level. What do you not understand about a 1-to-1 ratio?
So
Okay.
I might be able to take the temperature down a little
I do
bit.
get that.
He's not actually talking about your patients right now. Like, I think that might be part of the disconnect is, and I think the answer is probably simpler than he's necessarily looking for. It feels like the answer is probably the MRI is only one piece of what you look at when you assess a client or a patient. He's acknowledging the fact that there are lots of people with positive readings on an MRI who don't actually have pain, but that's not relevant to who you work with, because if they're working with you,
it's a red herring actually, because they come to me because they're in pain and their back's fucked up, dude. They don't just come to me when they have they think their back's messed up and they randomly get an MRI the next night and they come right to me. These people have been in pain there isn't a false positive. These people are some of these people are suicidal. Some people go through with the suicide. I don't see people that are just phantom cases or fakers or people that want out of work for a couple of weeks. So yes, I totally agree. There are MRIs that show a disc bulge that used to be pain. They just didn't even know they had pain. It just manifested as tightness, or it just never radiated and never hit a nerve root of the thecal sac. And it just stood there until one day it crosses the tipping point and it does cause pain. But that study isn't followed up with. That's just that particular case that does show, just because you have anything, we treat the person, not the MRI. I could pull up an MRI that looks like someone took a ball peen hammer with this guy's laminectomy and what his spine looks like. He's got no disc and he has zero pain. We got it out in like 3 months. I can show you someone that has small circumferential disc bulging and facet thickening, that any time that she walks around and stands for too long, her back gets so grumpy and achy that she can't stand it. If you don't do a test to know to look for facetogenic thickening, whether it be an effusion or arthritis or just hypertrophy or and then circumferential bulging, then you're not going to even know what to look for. So the MRI is a small part. Some people don't have MRIs, but to say MRIs are unnecessary would be a bit that's actually unprofessional, because you do need to get a scan to make sure that red flags, and we're not dealing with cancer or different cysts. Tarlov cysts are a bitch for people. They get Tarlov cysts. So you need to get an MRI anyway. And this whole thing that it's going to fear monger and scare the person is a bit overblown, at least for the people that come and see me. Now, for the person that just tweak their back, I don't see those people. And so that might be a bit different for those people. But speaking in my case, that's why we need 4 hours, because the MRI is 15, 20%, sometimes are at the most. But that's the thing. We use all these different things. I'll read the clinician's report before I read the doctor's report, the surgeon's report, the PT's notes, the chiropractor's notes. So each assessment looks unique. And sometimes a person just needs to cry for 2 hours. Sometimes they need to cry for 2 hours because no one's listened to them. Why? Because there's no assessment done. So you don't do an assessment in 30 minutes, and all those visits at 30 minutes are great, but you will have a different guy sometimes, or a girl, and you're around in the room with different people, and it's not personable. No one asks them, how are you doing with your back injury? How long have you been in pain? and there's no assessment done, and there's not time for it. So that's why we need the time, and that's why we had the success with the difficult clients that we do. It's because we have to be different. We check everything. Sometimes someone needs to get on some medication, and that's between their doctor and them, because they are a hypochondriac, and freaking they are always looking for something to go to the doctor about. They love going to the freaking doctor. But those people don't make their way to me. They get sorted out by the doctors in the system, if they're just, crazy or pill seekers or whatever.
Can you, I mean, I don't know, maybe this is shifting gears. Maybe this falls under jazz music. We've danced around, no pun intended, the psychology piece of this. And I kind of want to ask you, for you specifically, coming back from injury, getting back under the bar, like, what did that look like? And I realize that's kind of intentionally broad, because one of the reasons we kind of initially reached out to you was because in our setting, so often we see folks that get injured, and then that injury becomes their personality. There's kind of a fear, I guess I would say, to get back to kind of performance. Whereas for you, I mean, you literally, like you said, went back and forth with Stu of like, that was your intent all along. So like, what did the psychological aspect of this whole journey look like for you?
Well, powerlifting and lifting big weight was what I loved, and it's what I wanted to do no matter what. And I let the same focus that helped me set all-time world records, the same mentality, had me holding back and listening to the person that knew more about healing a spine than I did. And I let that become my focus. So my walking, my movement, my exercises, my nutrition, everything was locked in like I was prepping for a meet. But the intensity was different. The volume was different. The exercises were different. So we're also going to have to talk about the different demographics too, right? My mindset is not going to be the average layperson's, just like a super soldier's is not going to be the average mindset, right? The people that come to me after getting blown up in selection, they're not weak-minded. They made it through selection. They're not like, I'm scared. Well, if you're scared, you just probably should stop all of this. You're scared to hurt your back. I get it, but we're all scared. But we move forward. When I every time I used to get under the bar, I was scared. I had fear, but it was healthy fear. So it's going to depend on the population, right? That you're working with, and how you treat them, as far as whether I can even use myself as an example for them, because my mentality is so much different. So I try to relate to them, and getting to know someone in an interview like that and having a thorough intake form, this person, okay, they played band in high school. They're not a jock. So they're not going to be able to relate to my mentality. So I have to think outside the box a little bit. And then I could, change my approach a little bit, or soften it, or whatever it may be. But it all comes down to you wanting it. And that sounds corny and cliche, but if you really want to get your athleticism back, your resilience back, then whether it's training and doing a bunch of berserk side bends and Russian twists and back extensions and leg raises, or it's just staying calm and slowly rebuilding resilience, you'll do it, whatever it takes. Whether you have to sit in a room for 24 hours, or you're rucking with a 120-pound rucksack for 10 miles, and you got short legs and you got to run the whole thing. Sorry, we'll do what we need to do. And so it's not for everybody. It isn't. There's, you guys know about the mental health crisis and how many people are impacted by back pain. Pretty much everyone at some time in their life will be impacted by some sort of back pain, if not back injury. And man, some people just never get back on track, ever. So a lot of these people that come and see me, they're not super athletes. They are just trying to get their life back. They hurt themselves deadlifting in the gym. They're not serious lifters. They're not going through a course. And I've got to instill confidence in them that they can get off the toilet, and they can get off the floor, and they can learn to move and not throw their back into a spasm, because they don't understand they have a 3-point hinge in their back, or they hinge at thoracolumbar. Every time they sit up out of the chair and they get a stab in their back, because the assessment showed they had an L4, L5 posterior disc herniation, according to the MRI and the assessment, 1-to-1 ratio. And every time he bends at that level, he gets a stab or whatever, T12 L1, a stab right there every time. So my job is to give people movement confidence and movement competence on how they can get up out of the chair without throwing themselves into a spasm. So the mental aspect is a tough one, but if you want it bad enough, you'll do it. And so I think this audience will be able to relate to that you gotta, it isn't always about smashing through walls. Sometimes you just gotta wait for the door to open or the right person to open the door for you. And that's what happened with McGill, because I tried. It's not like I'm talking off at the mouth like I didn't try to fix my own back for 4 years. I tried everything. And except for desensitizing, stopping the bending and twisting core exercises, and let my spine cool down and stop frictioning up my nerves and crushing my spine, and let it heal up and rebuild some resilience and scaffold over. And I did another 100+ thousand-pound squats after that day with McGill, and 3 over 1,200 and 1 over 1,300. And I'm pain and symptom free, this 12 and a half years later. So it isn't just anecdotal that we figured it out with me, but the hundreds of people that I've helped at every level. And when everyone else has failed to break through to them or get through to them or spend time with them or whatever it may be. But they've got to be willing to take the time off and put the ego aside. That's a lot of people's problem. Their lifting is their identity, right? You mentioned earlier about, the injury becomes their identity. That's what a weak person does. And I know people do it. So, okay, we're talking to an audience of people that are in the military. You need to be more than your body. You need to be more than just your back injury. But some people, I don't know why, but that becomes their identity, and they always like talking about their back. I guess it's just a conversation starter for themselves. But the people that talk about it a lot usually aren't very serious about fixing their back.
That's so true.
That is true.
I'm not going to be a little shit. I have a genuine question for you, Brian. I've used yours and then Stu McGill stuff ever since I was an intern in PT school. There's a lot of value in it. So my question for you is, what do you recommend for young clinicians to do to better treat low back pain, specifically the ones that don't have the 4 hours of time, but maybe we could make 2 here, 2 there. We can build it up.
How do you do your assessments?
Depends on the patient. Depends on the complexity. The easier patients are in and out.
What's easier?
They're usually low severity, low irritability, and they are still able to.
But you know that from an assessment. So how do you do your assessments to know all this?
Well, that's typically given to me subjectively.
Oh, so you don't get to pull things out of them because you don't have enough time?
No. That's what I'm saying.
They might forget that they fell out of the bleachers in high school when they have a spondylolisthesis, haven't had an MRI yet, and they forget to put it on the intake. Have you ever fallen? That dull ache you're talking about in your back, like a toothache, that sounds like it might be. Have you ever fallen hard? I forgot to tell you. Oh my gosh, 15 years ago, and my back has ached ever since. I'm glad you asked me that. That's why we need the time to pull.
Yeah.
Because it's not always a simple case.
No, for sure. I understand. The subjective exam is long and it's thorough to get a full understanding. The objective exam, depending upon how much time I have, is sometimes super thorough. Sometimes it's not super thorough. So that's what's
a thorough exam include?
Well, if you want a piece by piece, every little thing.
Well, just like I gave you a really thorough summary in like 5 minutes of what my 4 hours looks like. So what's your 2 hours look like?
Sure. Okay. If I have 2 hours of the patient, the first hour is going to be alone spent subjective examination. We do a full thorough assessment. We do.
What's the interview?
Yeah, the interview. Exactly. And then we'll look at
Okay.
old imaging and stuff like that. Now, I'm not trained. I don't read MRIs or anything like that. But if I have a question, I'll just call up the doc right down the street because we can do that. It's great. Or I'll call up the ortho doc who comes into the clinic every other week. We're super fortunate at my clinic. So we can do that. From there, we'll go into a pretty deep assessment. We'll look at range of motion. We'll look at strength. We'll look above and below the joint. We'll look at things that can refer there, that refer out of there.
Range of motion of what?
The joints themselves.
No, I mean,
above
like,
and below.
well, what you talking about? The spine?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on what they're coming in for, sure. But the spine is always assessed in all the joints. Even if they're coming in with, you said it earlier, you're coming in with calf pain, assess the spine. There could be some sort of radiating symptoms causing that. You never know. Is it a nerve? Is it a muscle? And more often than not, it probably is some neural component that's causing those symptoms to get aggravated. So that's why you got to do a thorough assessment up there.
Yeah, that's why you have to do a thorough assessment every time. That'd be my rebuttal to why the system doesn't work, and you can't just buzzsaw through people because there's a lot of people that, well, they end up seeing me because of those exact points that I'm making. It's just it's so the recommendation that I would give to a clinician to get better and more efficient is you got to bail out of the system and work for yourself. That's the way you're going to truly make a difference and be able to spend time with the patient and give them the care that they need instead of what someone else dictates arbitrarily for you, which is not in the best interest of the patient.
Got it.
So that'd be so number one, you got to break out of the system, and plenty of them do. The best ones do work for themselves. Typically they contract, they consult, and they know that 15 minutes and you have your PTA that ends up doing some of the work with them. And there's a disconnect there, not just in education, but experience. And it's a disaster. And in general, the process of physical therapy, when I tore my bicep off, right before the big squat, I went and squatted the weight with my bicep torn off because I tore it off a month before the meet. And so I've delayed surgery until after the meet. And so I wanted to go. I hadn't been in physical therapy in a while, so I went back, and they're going to help me with my bicep. So I go in there and I'm just quiet, and they're like, okay. Right away, they start doing range of motion tests. They don't ask me what I do, who I am, where I've been, where I'm going. And they want 1 million degrees of every range of motion, and they're baffled that I'm stiff. If they had asked me my background, I'd have told them, well, I've been lifting weights, and I've never been able to touch my finger on my shoulder since I was 10 years old. So what the hell does that have to do with anything right now? But there's no assessment done. And so, of course, I went there and, saw the people running around the room and, the cycle of the physical therapy. And I know some places operate differently, but that's the model for physical therapy. But find one area that you could specialize in and master it, because you can't be a jack of all trades in physical therapy. You can be pretty good at some of these things and better at others, but find one thing that you want to focus on and be the best at it instead of just kind of being okay at all these different things. And people will come to you from all over the world.
Cool. I got to sneak a fast question in. We're already way over an hour, so we'll wrap up soon here. But we had a bunch of other questions we wanted to ask you about. I don't want to miss one. I think it's since 2020.
I can go as long as you guys want, unless you guys are scared.
I mean, I might get in trouble if I keep going too much longer, so we'll see
He's
about
the
that.
one with the girlfriend.
But
oh man,
sorry guys. But
I've talked a lot, and I gave Jeb a little bit of crap earlier. I'm just kidding, John.
So I'm curious. You started a line of CBD products in 2020. Mm-hmm. I am curious what your experience with CBD has been that led you all the way to the point of having your own line of products for that. It sounds like you got pretty into that. It played a big role for you. I'm just curious where that came from.
Well, if I were to allude that CBD was like the biggest game changer with my lifting and healing and anything like that, yeah, I don't want that to be the impression at all. But during my last prep, one of my friends that I went to high school with, she was into cannabis and such on the West Coast. And she's like, let me send you a bunch of stuff. And maybe you want to do something at some point. And so this is back in 2019 before the pandemic. So she sent me a bunch of stuff, and, I liked it. Okay. And I said, make it stronger. Let's try this thing. Let's try that. And I ended up finding there's some things that I was happy with that I used all of 2020, and I liked it, and I slept better, and it's good for taking away some unwanted muscle tension and such. But I think that CBD can be helpful for some people, but just like any drug or supplement, like some people will have a half a dropper and they'll be knocked out like a horse tranquilizer. Other people will be like, it didn't do anything, man. This is some expensive oil that you sold to me. Some people, they'll it's so crazy how people respond to different stimuli and medicines, because some people will be like, I stopped all my SSRIs after taking CBD for a month or 2 months. I'm not saying I recommend anything like that, but some people respond really well to it and other people don't. I think I respond okay to it, but if I had to tell you that it's more powerful than an opiate or something like that, like that'd be ridiculous. But it can take the edge off. It can be complementary to THC. And I know people in the military can't take THC, but I have quite a few military clients that are in SF and such that that use the CBD products. And I've had multiple people in drug cell rep. One guy was a nuclear plant fireman that got drug tested while taking the oral, so you would know. So we use CBD isolate, so people, police, fire, military, there's no problems with them testing positive for THC. But CBD, I think, is helpful for a lot of people. And I was rubbing something on my quads and my adductor that I tore. I've strained it quite a few times that I'm trying to work through right now. But yeah, I think it's good. And I got into it first being a user, and I did the taste of it. Everywhere was awful, and the quality was all full or broad spectrum, which just has a proprietary formula that they don't have to tell you how much CBD is actually in there. It's all different CBN, CBG, and hemp, and they just say, here you go. And it might have more than 0.3% THC, and then you get popped for a drug test, and we're not going to take that risk with that. So I got into it once I knew it was isolate and people wouldn't fail drug tests, and it worked for me, and we got the formula dialed in. And yeah, for some people, like the cooling formula, it's not gonna fix their destroyed back or anything, but to help them sleep at night and take away a little bit of fascial or muscle tension, it could be great. Or people with eczema seem to do well with some of the balms. But for some people, they'll be like, I don't think it does anything. It smells good or it tastes good. That's about all they'll say, you know?
I want to, so we have a couple closers that we kind of go to every time, and I'm curious your answer to this one, and it's a two-parter, if you'll allow me.
Yeah.
One thing you've changed your mind on, one thing you've doubled down on. You can go either way to start.
I've changed my mind a little bit more on people that are dead set on getting surgery, back surgery, a micro, and I don't think they give it enough time, and doctors will give them these crazy scare tactic. You're gonna lose all sensation in your shin, and this is gonna happen, when they'll just have like fleeting symptoms in their tibialis every once in a while. And now I'll tell them once, I don't think you should get it. You have some pain in your back too. Those aren't general good micro outcomes. It'll take away your L5 pain probably, but it will not touch your back pain. And so I just let people kind of do it. If I'll tell them, and then, but I won't beat them. I'll let them do what they want to do at the end of the day. So I've kind of backed off of being like, no, you don't have constant unrelenting leg pain or cauda equina or any red flag symptoms. Why are you rushing after 3 weeks of wanting to get a microdiscectomy? It's not good. And you're going to be going back a few more times if you don't change some of your habits. But anyway, anymore, I'll just tell them what I think. And if they want to get it, say, okay, let me know how it goes. One thing I haven't, because you can't force them. I mean, what are you going to do? Like, you're going to yell at them and tell them you better not get the surgery? Like, you could only do so much. That's why we can't guarantee success. Whether we have 4 or 10 or 50 hours with someone, we can't guarantee success. But the more time we spend with the client and teach them movement competency and confidence and empower them, don't scare them with the MRI. Don't scare them with that. We'll tell them how good their spine looks most of the time, but things to watch out for. They've never had someone sit down and ask them, how are you doing? How are you doing with all this? Man, I'm glad you're asking, because I was going to go home and kill myself tonight. No one's asked me in the last 10 years how I'm doing ever since I came back from Afghanistan and my back hasn't been right. Thank you for asking that. And then you can empower them. Like, hey, you can move, you can live pain-free. You can get back to your life. So that's an aside. But one thing that I've doubled down on is the system being so broken. Like I just see it too much. I see some of the best heart surgeons from Mayo Clinic and such that come in that won't even have Mayo Clinic PTs, and the surgeons see them because they see like the success rates. Surgeons never see their patient 2 weeks after the surgery unless they're getting a revision. They don't do a year follow-ups. They don't have data on that. They don't have 2 year. Now, some doctors may do that, but generally speaking, they do not do that. They do not have year and 2 year follow-ups. What they do is, if the person survives surgery, sometimes that's a successful outcome. If they have less pain for the first 2 weeks, it's a successful outcome. If they have some reduction in pain, like it's really goofy. And when you have surgical people, members of surgical teams, orthopedic, neuro, whatever it may be, when they don't even want their own team working on them, and they are one of the better ones in the country, you start to have your eyes open. And I can't talk about some of the things, but people don't get their back fixed in the system, and there's reasons for that.
Can I ask? So I know I just told you that was a closer, but I'm going to close my closer with another closer, because you've mentioned a couple of times now the system being broken, and I'm curious how you would rebuild the system, because all of us work in this kind of nascent, embedded, tactical human performance thing that we're still, quite frankly, trying to figure out.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of folks that are willing to listen to somebody who's been there, done that, say, hey, if I could rebuild this whole thing, this is what it would look like.
Well, I'm not trying to be a politician, so that'll be their job to figure out. My job is to provide a service. So that's, my job is to provide. I'm not saying I have an answer. I can critique something without having a solution. That's a fallacy.
I think that's a great point. So should I walk back my closer, or do you want me to ask you the keys to the castle question?
The keys. All right. Let me. So I'll just briefly. It's going to end up going privatized. Mark my word. It's going to go where everyone operates cash pay. There are going to be different groups, different private, better structured insurances that have groups that doesn't operate like these silly escalations that they have with go to your doctor 2 times and you got to go to physical therapy for 9 weeks. Meanwhile, you have a unstable spondylolisthesis and you can't walk, and they're not letting you get an MRI because of the system being so stupid. But then sometimes you might be able to, but there's no organization to that. You know how much MRIs cost in Virginia? $5,000. $5,000. North Carolina, sometimes they're not even less than $2,000 with insurance. Cash pay in Florida, $250.
Man,
the system's insurance it's a scam. So that's the biggest thing. The insurance scam would have to be figured out, and people are figuring it out. I'm not just talking about Mangione. I'm not saying that he's a hero or anything like that. I'm saying that people are fed up. And interestingly enough, he had a failed spinal fusion. He had a failed spinal fusion, and he was angry at the system, and he snapped. And that's not the right way to handle anything as a man, or if anyone with morals. It's not his fault. That's you lashing out at someone that hasn't directly done anything to you. That's cowardice, actually, and sneaking them. But I do understand people's frustration when their doctor tells them they're fine or they're fucked. What is that? That's what they do. And so I come off maybe as a little bit set in my ways, or maybe even as a know-it-all. But when you have nothing but failed back clients come to you every single day for years and years and years, you start to predict the patterns, and it's not you, It's the system. It isn't just me seeing these people. It's me and all my colleagues. We have these talks about the system being so busted, and it's going to have to, and it's going to start with insurance. And then you got to have more trained specialists in each shoulder, cervical spine, lumbar spine, the hip, the knee, the ankle, the foot. You're going to have specialists there that can handle the most complicated cases of the knee and such. It isn't going to work with just having people that just kind of moonlight as a knee guy and a wrist guy, and it's going to have to change. So more trained specialists in the field, and I'm doing my part by putting content out and writing books and helping as many people as I can. And I put out good content on YouTube, but people still can't really implement it because they're told by their coach or their trainer that you don't need that long to heal a back, and this disc study shows that you don't have pain, it's all in your head, and all this ridiculousness, overcorrection with pain science. Now, the psychological aspects don't influence pain, but you'll make someone fucking crazy by telling them they don't have back pain when they do. They just haven't had an assessment. That's a good way to make someone snap and not be crazy, by telling them that they're crazy, but they haven't been given an assessment. They have a open fissure disc bulge that lights their ass on fire every time they sit for more than 10 minutes. And they've been told for 5 years that they're a nutcase, and they're put on psychiatric drugs and told that they're crazy and never treated. And I see these people, and it makes me this way because I see how fucked up it is.
All right. I promise I won't close with any more closers, but I do want to thank you for hanging out with us. It's been awesome making jazz music with you. I'll say that.
I don't know if I should take that as a compliment or not.
I meant that with love. I meant that as a pure compliment, because Alex and I have actually made the jazz music reference before, so it's music to my ears.
It is a recurring thing. That is not the first
to hear
time
it from somebody else.
Here.
I thought you were going to say something about keys to the castle. La 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 la.
I asked the keys to the castle question, and then you said you weren't a politician, and then I reframed it.
What is keys to the castle? What's that?
Keys to the castle.
What are the keys to the castle?
That's the way,
if you could change everything, what would you do? Yeah. So that is the question he asked.
If you had the key, I don't know if that's a real saying or not. I've heard of it as a saying, but typically when we close people out, it's like, oh, if you had the keys to the castle.
I'm going to hit the stop recording button because now we're arguing about keys to the castle. Before we dive into anything else, I do need to do one disclaimer before we get in trouble. I'm just going to read directly from Army Regulation 600-85, followed by a few clarifying comments, followed by a call for an expert to come talk to us about this. But the use of products made or derived from hemp, as defined in 7 U.S. Code 1639, including but not limited to CBD, regardless of the product's THC concentration, for example, THC-8, claimed or actual, and regardless of whether such product may be lawfully bought, sold, and used under law applicable to civilians, is prohibited regardless of the route of administration or use. So by the book, technically, military service members, and I believe it applies to civilians working for the DoD as well, can't take CBD. That's what the rule says. Now, the way that's tested is testing for THC, and people who are getting CBD products that are not necessarily hemp derived, or they're not tested for making sure there's no THC in there, get caught up in it because they were tested for THC. They're not actually testing for CBD, is my understanding. And I will acknowledge that I've known quite a few active duty folks that were using CBD and not getting in trouble. But I wanted to clarify that before we left that one hanging.
So I can rub CBD oil on my back?
As a civilian employee of the DoD, I'd have to check.
I just have to say, were we recording when we were fighting about keys to the castle?
I have not yet decided where the cutoff line is.
The point is, he was right. The point is, he was right. The phrase is keys to the kingdom. So I've been screwing that up.
Yep, that is definitely what it is.
I have to give him his due. And I also just want to say, I said this to him after recording, team, that was the most fun I think we've had. I legitimately thought he was going to kill John at one point, and then come to find out he was just fucking with you the whole time.
Yep.
We were making jazz music. He will be back on. So I know we've said this before to people, but my hunch is that this conversation will make some PTs mad. I don't know, John, would you think that they might get upset by some of these things?
Probably. Yeah.
I say that to say this. If any questions arise and you guys have things you want to ask Brian, he has already expressed a willingness to come and hang out with us again. I would imagine the second time, now that we've all kind of had that first date experience, we'll be making all kinds of music. So send us your questions, critiques, comments, whatever. We'll throw all of them at him and just kind of let him go crazy. I will tell you though, if you did not watch the video or listen to any of his powerlifting accolades, he's strong as shit. So, if you do decide you want to fight him, that's up to you. I'm not going down that road. But, man, I feel there's like an adrenal come down after hanging out with him for an hour.
I will chime in to say, I think we didn't really dive into how the rehab world feels about Stu McGill, how the strength and conditioning world feels about Stu McGill. I mentioned this to you guys pre-recording, and he even alluded to it in there about like straw mans pretending that the McGill Big Three is the entire McGill method. I think it's easy in like certain corners of health and fitness social media to rip on oversimplified versions of what McGill does. At the end of the day, if you listen to what Brian just said here and you watch some of what McGill does and you go back and watch that like Lane Norton assessment and the things I mentioned, it's really just a really deliberate implementation of a biopsychosocial understanding of back pain. That foundationally, I think that's what it is. The internet loves to latch on to things like the Big Three and pretend that's the whole thing. But it's because nuance is hard and it takes 4 hours to do it.
Yeah, John.
Yeah.
Step up your game, dude.
Jeez.
What are you doing, man?
John, are you going to start a military cash-based PT clinic?
Yeah, to do that, 100%.
What were your thoughts on his answer to your question about just? I mean, I don't want to simplify it, but like basically just go private.
Well, I mean, that's not possible if you're working in the military. It's
fair.
It's an awesome answer, cool idea, but definitely not possible. I mean, yeah, I think Alex just hit on it. If we had the amount of time to be as deliberate as he is, I think we'd have really good success, but our access to care would be months.
I'm going to say it though. I think programs like H2F, embedded human performance type of programs, have more ability to get individualized like that. Mm-hmm. We just had a conversation at work today about a guy we've been working with literally for like a couple of years now, like on and off appointments, addressing multiple different things and like building an actual relationship with the person where you know them, where you see them around the base. I think that's like, if that's at the root of how we provide proper care to people and actually get them better, I think these embedded human performance programs have the ability to do that a way that normal clinical TMC type of treatment doesn't.
I think as you're talking about that, it just brought to mind that the one unique advantage the military setting has is that your community is literally right there. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you have Brian is running a private clinic and he sees these folks and then they go out into the world. So he might not run into them when he's going to get lunch. Whereas in our setting, you do kind of have that added benefit. Now, I would say that a lot of folks don't take advantage of that. A lot of H2F teams and embedded teams in general just kind of stay in their place and they don't necessarily go out. And, we talk about being embedded all the time. It's like, well, my measure of success for a long time with my strength coaches in my head has always been, if I walk from where we are now to brigade headquarters, how many soldiers are going to say hi to you? Mm-hmm. And I've joked about that with the guys over the years, but it is true that the ones that subjectively seem to be getting the concept are the ones who stop 5, 6, 7 times because they see people that they know. And I'd be curious, I don't know, John, you're in a kind of a different setting now, but like, what would happen if the first appointment you had with folks was just a conversation? Would the whole thing fall apart, or would that be a net positive?
No, I think it'd be a net positive.
Like no, and I mean strength coaches, PTs, dietitians, like we don't start doing any of our stuff. We just get to know you for an hour.
I mean, I think even the patients that come in and they demand an assessment, they want to be heard. So if you have a good, thorough time just chatting with them, they oftentimes leave feeling better. I think that's probably what Brian does so well, because he's big, he's charismatic, he's gregarious. I think people feel like they can be honest with him. I think that is a huge skill that providers have that sometimes you're born with, sometimes you don't have it, and it makes it really difficult. It's probably where a lot of people do fall into some areas of failure. But if you're like him and you can build that rapport easily, oh my goodness, your results are going to be so much better.
I mean, maybe they're born with it, but maybe it's Maybelline.
Is that the end? Is that the closer?
No, I wanted to say that because it was funny, but I knew as I said, it's like Alex is going to think that's me closing us out. No, I won't be too much. I literally do. I'm going to go into work tomorrow now thinking about like, man, what if we just had a policy where the first touch point is a conversation? It's not 4 hours. I think 4 hours, like you said, is kind of outside the realm of possible. But the nugget of wisdom there is like, there is a huge biopsychosocial piece to this whole thing, which Alex, we've been saying for years, dude.
But depending upon the complexity of the patient, you could cumulatively get 4 hours in one day. If you get a severe complexity patient, have them go around the whole H2F facility, meet with everybody. I mean, that's what we do with all our long-term injuries. And so that
but
they
if
have
you had
all those
4,000 soldiers, could you cycle an individual through the facility?
Well, I think that's where it
Not
comes.
every individual in the unit, but the people who
but it's
need
like
it.
those severity, like high complexity injuries that are going to be long-term, that need the different touch points.
Man, maybe this closer should just become its own podcast at some point.
Probably.
But no, I don't know. Do you guys have anything else? I had a blast.
Yeah, more of this soon.
Yeah, we'll have more. So seriously, folks, like if this pissed you off, let us know. Send us questions. If this made you happy, send us questions. We'll get back in. I do apologize to John. We brought him on last minute because we thought it'd be fun. Turns out you got called little man. You got told that your butt was clenched. He told you that you didn't understand science. I love him for all three of those things because that's how you and I talk to each other. But thanks for coming on last minute with a 2-week-old baby to get your ass ripped in front of us.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. See you guys next time.
See ya.
Hey, Alex, let's cover our ass real quick.
Oh, great idea, Drew. All right, guys. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode. Before you go, please rate and review the pod on the listening platform of your choice. You can also visit us on our website at www.mopsinmos.com. That's mops, the letter N, mos.com. You can check out the library of podcast episodes, our latest blog entries, any helpful resources, and also sign up for our newsletter.
Drew nailed it. Just to underline a couple of things, the podcast entries have in-depth show notes on the website. So if you missed anything or you want to read any of the research we talk about, it is all there. You can, at the bottom of the website, sign up with your email and receive future updates from us. The blog posts go a little bit more in depth in kind of written form on a couple of topics we get questions about all the time. But most importantly, I just want to ask all you guys, our best way the word gets out is absolutely word of mouth. So tell your friends, tell the people you work with, anybody you think would find it useful. Thanks for spreading the word.
If you have any questions or comments, feel free to shoot us an email at either Drew or Alex at mopsinmos.com.
Or there's a contact form on the website.
Thank you.